It's Create Day, my friends. So let's jump right into this mixed media Valentine's Day DIY. I came across this old sign that I've had for probably 15, 20 years and thought it would be perfect to do a makeover for Valentine's Day. And I'm also making over a teapot, but that would be too long for this video, so that will be done in a separate one. The first thing to do was take my wire cutters and remove that entire front piece just by cutting those wires in the back. Then just using my heat tool and a little scraper, I was able to remove all of the stars. I removed the hanger and the raffia bows that were attached to the front, and then it was time to just give this thing a good cleaning and sanding. I started with an 80 grit sandpaper so I could clean up the glue that was left behind from removing the stars. Then I went to a 120 grit so I could smooth out the entire board. I mixed up some of the Durham's water putty to fill the holes. I taped over the holes in the back because I'm filling them from the front and I didn't want it to leak through the back side. Once that was dry and I gave it a final sanding, now I can give it a good coat of my white gesso. And when that was dry, I go in with my cottage white chalk paint and paint the front and the back. When the paint was dry, I wanted to give the back a more finished look, so I took my clear wax and mixed in some dark brown acrylic paint, and I'm just brushing that on and then wiping it off with a rag so that it just gives this kind of streaky, almost wood grainy look. It's time to start building the layers of the front of our piece. So I have all these papers here that kind of have the colors and designs that I like. And I'm just going to tear out all the pieces that I want to use, making sure everything has kind of a rough edge and not a nice, neatly cut edge. Once I get them all placed to where I think I want them to go, I just take my Mod Podge and start gluing them down. And then you just want to smooth out any air bubbles kind of moving from the center out to the edges. With the Mod Podge all dry, I just go in with my sanding block and remove all of those edges. Where the sanding block doesn't fit, I just use the piece of sandpaper on its own, but you could also use like a nail file for little tight areas like that. And now I would just want to seal the edges with the Mod Podge. Now I'm going to do a whitewash with my gesso. So I'm just watering it down and we'll brush it over, and it's going to look like it covers everything at first, but when it dries, you'll see that there's just more of a haze. When the gesso was dry, I went ahead with this stencil that I wanted to put on here of this violin and the music notes. I thought it would be so pretty. So I stenciled it on with chalk paste so that I could go in and then paint over the chalk paste and have it more raised and prominent than if it was just a stencil done with paint. And yes, I absolutely love this. I think it's beautiful. So now I'm just doing some more of the texture paste with a different stencil in a couple of spots around the top of the heart. Then I added this brick pattern stencil as well. Any little spots that you get that you didn't want on there, it's just easy to clean it up with a little baby wipe. And so I just went ahead and put this in a couple of different places, some vertical, some horizontal, just adding the texture onto this piece. Now with the gesso again, I am going to prime some wooden hearts that I want to use, and I'm also going to use it on my flowers because of the sprays and stuff I'm going to use. I want them to have a surface for that to adhere to. So all the flowers got kind of this scant coat of the gesso. It's not like a full covered paint job on these at all. It just gives the other things something to adhere to. And now we're going to add another layer with some stamps. The first one I'm doing is Fanciful Flourishes in the color Pink Peony by Archival Ink. And I just stamped randomly over several spots. The next one I want to do is a script stamp, and I'm going to use my StazOn ink in the color Caribbean Green. Now I'm going to use the larger of the Fanciful Flourishes stamp with my StazOn ink in Plum. I absolutely love this color. It is so pretty. And I'm just going to stamp random spots wherever I think it looks good. There's no wrong or right here. You just kind of have fun and do what you want to do. Now with my chalk paste in the color Iron Gate, I'm going to add yet a little more texture here on the outside of this heart by using my palette knife, dipping it in the chalk paste, and then just scraping that onto the board. Not making solid lines, they're just kind of sketchy lines, but it just really adds to it. So I go horizontally and then I go in vertically and add some as well. This is a chipboard lamppost that I primed with gesso, and now I'm just painting it with black acrylic paint. And then with brushed bronze metallic paint, I'm going to dry brush over it as well. Now using my Distress ink in Vintage Photo, I am just using a little sponge applicator to go over the edges of all of my flowers. I thought I wanted this princess pink color for my hearts, but when I started to paint the first one, I realized that it was going to be too dark, so I just mixed in some white to get a much lighter pink. Once they were all painted, I grabbed some of the lavender paint and applied it with my little sponge dauber. Now here, I'm just mixing some of my Pearl X powdered pigment in the color Interference Violet with some Mod Podge. And then I can paint that on the hearts, and it adds just an iridescent sheen to them. And then using my StazOn ink in the color Plum, I'm just going to go around the edges of the hearts to kind of give them like an outline. I used a brush to get to the hard to reach spots that my ink pad couldn't get to, but you're going to want to use a brush that you don't want to use for painting because it will not be good for that after this. And now we're going to paint the violin. I have on my plate black, linen, honeycomb, espresso bean, yellow ochre, which I did not use, and cinnamon. I also have a little cup of water so that I can water these down as needed. And I'm going to start with the neck of the violin in black. This is my first time doing such a detailed painting on something like this. It had its challenges, but I actually really enjoyed it. It was very therapeutic. I had to fill in some of the spots where the stencil was open, but I wanted it to be a little more realistic. And shading and blending all the colors just was really enjoyable to me. And I hope that if you haven't tried something like this, that you do and you get the same kind of joy out of it that I did. I'm moving the camera in closer so that hopefully you can see this. You can see that I'm taking some of like the dark brown, adding a little bit of water to it, and then starting to work on the violin by going up against that neck and outlining the outer edge of the violin. And hopefully I won't have to talk through this, and you can just see the process as I mix and blend to paint this up. And here's the progress so far. Now I'm just painting in the musical notes with black. This violin is almost done. I just need to paint the flower that is in front of it. Now with some gray and some of the linen paint, I'm going to go over the little brickwork raised chalk paste stencils that I did. I'm just blending the two colors as I see fit to get the look I want. Now I'm blending together Merlot and black acrylic paint to do an outline of the flower. I'm mostly hitting just the lower points of the flower so that I can use it kind of like some shading for some of the lighter colors. And now for the flower, I have a red, several pinks, and some white. I'm just starting with the darker pinks to go in the bottom part of the little flower petals, and then I will use the lighter colors to come up towards the top, and then highlighting the very tips with the white paint. I am by no means a skilled painter or artist of any sort. I look at a picture and figure out how can I try to duplicate that based on what little knowledge I have of blending and shading with colors. So with that being said, I'm not going to be your expert on how to paint this stuff. By all means, you need to look at what other people do that are more experienced than me. For the leaves, I'm going to use leaf green, deep celery, and dew. And here I'm semi-blending. I'm not mixing a whole new color. I'm just getting a little of the darker and medium shade green on my brush to kind of start at the base of the leaf and work my way up. That way I get both colors on there, but they're not separate and they're not completely blended together like one color. Then I can go back and forth between the colors to add a little more of this one here, a little more of that one here, until I get the look that I want. And then I can add some of that lightest green color on the tips just for some highlighting. So now for the strings on the violin, there were already some very just naturally occurring streaks on there that were kind of almost silver looking. It was just the way the paint went on with what was underneath. And so I took my little tool that's like for clay sculpting, has a sharp edge, and I just kind of scraped on that black paint a little more to finish out the look of the strings. And this is my little clock face made out of chipboard that I primed with gesso, and now I'm giving it a coat of black acrylic spray paint. And my little wooden hearts that we painted pink are going to get a quick spray of distress oxide in Vintage Photo. It just helps give it more of an antique look. So now I have these flowers that I cut out of a piece of lace fabric, and using that same Vintage Photo distressing ink, I'm just going to go around the outer edges of these flowers. I'm using my Misty Teal Gilder's wax to add some patina to my little clock face. Next, I want to add some of the Spanish copper and then the antique gold. Now I'm going to use my StazOn ink in jet black just to go around the edges of the heart. It's time to start adding some of these embellishments, so I'm using my tacky glue to glue down the hearts that were pink and then sprayed on with that distressed oxide. And I'm also going to add my little key that's on a chain. I need to add that before I finish doing the other parts of this piece in the middle there, because that has to be in place before I put the piece on top of it. And I used hot glue for this initially, but that did not hold, so I went back and did some E6000. Now I'm going to use my Gorilla Wood glue to attach the clock face on top of the intersection of those hearts and where I have the chain that's attached to the key. Now before I start gluing my flowers on the board, I have to kind of pinch them together with some hot glue to put them back into the shape of a flower. They kind of all flattened out when I cut them off of their original stem. So I'm just kind of like putting them back together before I can put them on the board. But before I do that, I want to attach my lace flowers, and I'm just doing that with some of the gel medium. Now I'm going to start attaching my flowers with the biggest one first. I'm going to use hot glue for this one and for the little blue flowers and my pink roses. But after that, I start adding other things and I go to the gel medium because it will give me more working time to arrange things. But I did start out with the hot glue, and you could use that for everything. I just wanted a little more working time. Now here I'm just attaching a few things to the bottom of this. I have this heart button that's kind of a steampunk look button, and then I have my little handmade paper buttons, and then I put that blue, kind of teal blue flower on there, but I end up taking that off and switching it out for a different one that looked a lot better. And here I'm just attaching the lamppost with some hot glue. And adding my little half heart to the side of my board. So now I'm using the Distress Oxide Hickory Smoke I took some aquarium gravel and painted it with my white gesso, and now I'm adding this color over the top of it. And it will make sense in a little bit. So I have all my gears that were painted with the white gesso, and now I'm adding the black acrylic paint. And they will also be getting the treatment of the teal gilding wax and the rub and buff, Spanish copper, and antique gold. I felt like the clock face was still just a little too dark, so I went ahead and went back over it with more of the teal gilding wax and a little more of the gold rub and buff. And now with the gel medium, I'm going to put all those little aquarium gravel pieces into place underneath and alongside our little lamp post. Now to my lamp post, I want to add this little number strip from the ephemera pack by Tim Holtz, and I'm just applying it with my gel medium. This is just where I'm adding that Spanish copper and the antique gold to the gears. Now with the gel medium, I'm going to go ahead and start adding in the rest of the flowers and my paper handmade buttons to finish off the little floral swag that kind of comes down from around the big main rose down the side of the board. Here's where I attach the other flower that I liked better at the bottom part, and then I add one last little flower onto the half heart. And now I'm just mixing some of the gray and the linen colors to go in around the aquarium pebbles to give them a little more color. Now it's time to go ahead and add our gears to this centerpiece, and I'm just using my gel medium to attach them. Now I'm adding this little love sign. It came in a pack from Hobby Lobby. I don't think it was Tim Holtz. I think it was maybe Paper Company. And now I'm adding enchanted shimmer to the tips of all of my flowers. Now I'm just adding this little top hat that also came in a Tim Holtz set. Now with my Stabilo Aquacolor pencil in black, I am going to outline around the number sign and the back side of this lamppost. These are really cool pencils that you can get wet and they just kind of almost turn into a marker. This is my first time using them, so I haven't perfected it, but I just really like the look it gives. It's just more like rustic and antique looking than if you used a regular marking pen, or you could use paint, definitely use paint, but I just like the effect that this gives. So I went ahead and did it around the love sign and on the bottom edges of the aquarium rocks. And now I'm just using some watered down gesso to kind of pounce over the brighter ink colors. Just make everything a little more muted. I've isolated my flowers with paper towel so that I can use this sealer as a spray and just to protect them from the splattering effects that I will be doing at the end. And now I'm using that sealer as a brush on for the rest of the board. So now we get to do some splatters. I'm going to use black first and then white. I water both of them down a little bit. Right there I was just removing the key. So I'm just dipping my brush in and tapping it to make the splatters all over the board. I go back over again with the white. And then lastly I do sunset gold pigment. I have to mix this with Mod Podge, and then I can water it down and do the same splattering effect. I'm using the gloss Mod Podge for this one. Now for the hanger, I want to use this pretty lace with the pearls in the middle, but I needed something a little more substantial behind it, so I have this twill tape in natural. So I just figured out how much I would need and cut it off. And then to kind of make it blend in with the rest of this, I went ahead and used the archival ink in Pink Peony to just kind of get it around the edges of the twill tape. Then I measured out a piece of the lace and pearl ribbon, the same length, and then just attached it with hot glue. Then I attached that to the back of the board with some more hot glue. I wasn't sure if this was going to stick because I waxed that back of the board, but it did. It stuck just fine and I had no problems with it. So there we are. It's finally all done. Lots of steps, but completely doable even for a beginner. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, I hope I've inspired you to go create something. See you next time.